What the play is actually about is how we all have a choice. We can all take action. We need not be repressed, oppressed by society. There are actions we can take, things we can do, activities we can undertake, things we can learn from other people, from each other.
And then you start getting up. We offer a kind of optimistic view that through unity and through understanding each other and learning and things like this, you can get out of this.
One form of alternative enterprise in South Yorkshire, the city of Sheffield. A landscape littered with the graves of industry once the basis of prosperity. Unemployment high and rising, management morale at a low ebb, widespread worker bitterness. So what does the future hold? In this series, we've looked at several policy options. What all these alternatives have got in common is the idea that future progress should be judged by getting the economy back onto a path of regular economic growth. Keynesian stimulation of the economy accompanied by devaluation and a prices and incomes policy. Reflation behind a wall of import controls as the alternative to mounting unemployment. Both aim at renewed economic growth out of the recession, as do present policies. Market forces slimming industry into a new competitiveness, which might lead to prosperity of the kind we used to have. But is this what we really want?
But rather more important, we were dissatisfied surely because we felt that maybe we got a few more washing machines and television sets, but the quality of life of the housing and of parks and of the general environment was deteriorating rather than improving. And that does seem to be a lesson we have to learn for expansion in the present.
So perhaps in the future we should be more concerned with the composition of output rather than just its total. What is produced is in fact one of the central questions in economics, to which, as every student of economics knows, two extreme answers can be given. The market solution is that what is produced is ultimately decided by consumers according to how they spend their incomes. If you think of it as an economic democracy, then the more votes they cast for a product, the more of it will be produced. Interpreting what consumers want are firms whose efficiency is judged by profits. The better they satisfy consumer wants, the higher the profit they make. The opposite to a pure market system is a command economy. Here, decisions about what to produce are directly taken by a government authority, according to what they think consumers want or need, or maybe ought to have. Enterprises are told what to produce, and their efficiency is judged by the overall costs and benefits to society. In practice, all economies are mixed economies, combining elements of both, with output partly being decided by consumers, partly by government. And what's interesting about Sheffield is the particular type of mix they're currently trying to evolve, in terms of what to produce, who decides, and how you judge efficiency. Sheffield has been treading its own often controversial path for many decades under leaders like David Blunkett, who's the present Labour Council chairman. He's dismissive of the more orthodox approaches to solving the city's problems.
We're opposed as much to the centralised, bureaucratic, central downwards planning of the economy as we are to monetarism and the belief in market forces and simply the law of the jungle. We believe in planning from the bottom up. In other words, community needs being reflected in decisions at local and at national and hopefully at international level, giving people some sort of say over their own lives.
The question of what is produced is of prime concern in Sheffield, the biggest and best-known example being its heavily subsidised public transport system. Bus fares are frozen at their 1975 level. You can travel the length or breadth of Sheffield for a maximum of only 16 pence. Total cost of the transport subsidy, £61 million. That's about £1 a week per head of the population. How can such substantial spending be justified?
They contribute massively towards the economy of the area, because instead of spending money on car parking, on knocking thousands of houses down to build even bigger motorways, to ruin the environment in terms of waste of fuel because you've got one person in a car, you're collectively deciding to use your resources in a sensible and communal sense.
Taxi drivers are predictably critical.
I think it's a ridiculous policy. We're subsidising the people who are not ratepayers.
They're losing money. With fares being so low, people are prepared to go bus.
A hydrotherapy pool for the disabled, where social conscience goes hand in hand with new hope for industry. A product Sheffield wants to encourage is a new hoist that will make it easier to lift aching limbs into and out of the water. The council's feeding this sort of R&D work to small cooperative companies like Mons Precision Services, where a group of engineers have already done preparatory work on the new hoist, with council encouragement.
There is also an officer being employed full-time by the Sheffield City Council to look into socially advantageous products which people like ourselves in Workers' Cooperative could probably produce.
The company has also been put on the track of solving a problem of real concern to council tenants: damp. The engineers, again supported by council encouragement, and later cash as well, are trying to make a dehumidifier that will improve life for thousands of tenants.
There are somewhere in the region of 90,000 council houses in Sheffield, and perhaps 20–25% of those suffer from damp, which is a very nasty thing in your house if you've ever experienced it. The dehumidifier being developed, hopefully, will improve on the ones on the market.
David Blunkett defends this emphasis on the composition of output, the need for socially useful production.
We as a community need those things. We need hospital equipment, we need hospital beds, we need materials for building houses, we need the things that go to make up a reasonable lifestyle. Those are the things that we're always going to need. We'll need to adapt them and modernise them, but those are the things we can join together as a community to provide. That gives them security, it gives the logic of an economy that doesn't fritter away its resources on plastic gnomes or on silly games or on warfare.
In one of Sheffield's dead and crumbling factories, in a roundabout way, even music's produced by the council. Youths are given a place to forget for a while the frustration of being unemployed.
I just think that if people want to do something, they've got the ability to do it. I think everybody's got that. I understand that there's if a guy's got a certain trade and there is no work in his area, then he's got problems. But I mean, I started out as a maintenance fitter, you know what I mean? And you know what steel's like in Sheffield at the moment. So you just take up rock and roll, and it's better, isn't it?
The telephone rings, I hear crazy things.
I'm glad I'm alive in this day and age, but I mean, it's not a hell of a good place to be. I mean, that's why we're doing this, to get out and go other places.
The unacceptable face of council involvement? Well, to some it probably seems so. For £150,000 of public money has gone on refurbishing the centre as a place for entertainment, potters, painters, actors and the like.
Now, the only money we've had from ratepayers has been for bare bricks and mortar to build this place. And pound for pound, it's very cheap. We have already created somewhere in excess of 30 jobs. It's going to provide a cultural centre that this area hasn't got. It's going to provide a centre for racial integration at a cultural level. West Indian communities and Asian communities have no centre where they go for cultural or popular music events in this city.
Those who come here to work are often young offenders who've done their community service and returned as volunteers. Work like this takes some of the bitterness out of being unemployed.
I was angry for 2.5 years about being unemployed. I still am angry. What we did about it was build this centre. I think it's important to show unemployed people that they don't have to stay unemployed and they don't have to fester in their own houses during the day.
But you're very lucky, aren't you?
No, we work very hard.
Subsidised transport, art centres, other local enterprises, socially useful production costs a great deal. It amounts to £74 a year for every man, woman and child throughout the Sheffield area. So who should decide what is produced? Why not leave the money in people's pockets and let them decide? Well, of course, one major problem about the market as a consumer democracy is that consumers have very different numbers of votes. Because income and wealth are unequally distributed, so is the freedom of consumer choice.
Well, because the idea that market forces are a democratic substitute for accountable elections and people who have to actually stand up and justify what they're doing to the public is an interesting one. I would believe in a democracy that had representation over the total use and of resources and what's happening to people. And frankly, the decisions for most people are between whether they can get a job and whether they can have decent food and housing and warmth, and not about the peripheries, which are encouraged all the time. It's amazing, those who most harangue people for misusing their resources and don't like bingo and buying of trivia are the very ones who make their money out of persuading them to do just that. And I think as a society we need to examine not merely how we respond to each other, but very much how we are actually interrelating what's happening to people, what our decisions do to others. And that is a very wide educational debate that's not just about economics, it's about social interaction as well.
Sheffield's particularly proud of its cooperative development scheme, small factories like Parkway Instruments on a new industrial estate. The council's appointed Mike Bauer as their development officer. This is the 10th cooperative he's helped to set up in areas like building, clothing, printing, electronics and engineering. His role is to bring some expertise to groups of workers, often newly thrown out of work, to combine and set up companies of their own, often taking over the work their former firms are no longer interested in.
Unfortunately, at the present stage of development in this country, the workers' cooperative movement is dominated by the Candles and Sandals Brigade, who sell brown rice and make brown bread. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not what this sort of cooperative is about, and I think that this sort of cooperative actually does demonstrate to working people in this city and elsewhere in Britain that the sort of things that they're normally involved in, things that ordinary working people are employed doing, can be run on cooperative lines and successfully. And if this is successful, as I'm sure it will be, it'll expand.
Sheffield's hope for cooperatives is that worker involvement will lead to more efficiency.
It's socially useful in the sense that it creates work for local people, it gives local control, which is an important factor, especially when so many people have been put out of work by people they didn't know or didn't know about, or who weren't in, not only not in this city, not in this country.
The long-established Sheffield engineering firm of Bowles is one that wouldn't agree with this philosophy. The company's voted with its feet and started rebuilding in Chesterfield. Quite simply, for them, Sheffield's many ventures meant their yearly bill was too high.
We left mainly because of the high rates, the overheads in the city centre. The rates were far too high. If we'd had the same size factory in Chesterfield, the rates costs would be something like £6,300. And in Sheffield we were paying £9,300. And for a small company employing 10 people, we felt that these sort of overhead, the differential was far too great. Many businesses in Sheffield that have come up against the same situation, a lot have gone out of business purely because of the high rates and high overheads.
The council believes firms like Bowles to be misguided and comes up with examples to back its own case.
I think you'll find that those who claim to have left Sheffield have done so for quite different reasons, and in fact very often, far from putting people off, we've actually attracted them. Over 500 applications in the first year to our employment department, the helping of well over 100 firms in that time, the ability to get together with local industry, often those who'd been opposed to us, who want to join together in a way that can be seen in other parts of the world to actually save their industry and save our community. And our motivation is to put our resources into putting people to work in the community rather than to putting them to stay at home.
So what's the criterion for deciding what is socially useful? Judging whether it's efficient involves a wider social accounting which looks at all the costs and benefits to society, even though they may not appear in a private firm's profit and loss account. So, is the City Hall the source of a new wisdom? A social watchdog, entrepreneur and promoter of industrial efficiency? Difficult for the average voter to judge, but in the business community there are certainly some who have their doubts.
To be quite frank, there aren't very many people at the town hall who've had the very hard, sharp end of business experience. And I find it rather regrettable that the town hall haven't consulted industry more for us to give them our advice, which we will gladly do. There is one other point, and some people feel in industry that if you're giving handouts, cash grants to small firms starting up, then they may be in competition against established companies in a better position to do so.
There was a steel company closing down where we, in fact, gave a £100,000 loan. A cheap loan, nevertheless, but nevertheless we get our money back in time. That saved the City Council from losing £60,000 a year rate income. Now that makes economic sense to us.
Well, there's a social accountancy as well, a social audit, and you look at the total cost that takes place. In other words, the way in which we use our resources as a community and as a nation, rather than seeing a private spending pattern and a public spending pattern. And we think that we ought to be debating publicly the accountability of the way we use all our resources, whether they're private in our pockets or whether they're public being democratically decided on.
Drawing up a balance sheet for the Sheffield approach to the composition of output is no easy matter. For the town hall to direct that certain goods and services should be produced because they're socially useful helps to ensure that poor people's basic needs are met. Otherwise, many consumers would lack the spending power to signal to the market that, for example, more buses or invalid hoists should be provided. Against this, there's first the fact that more public consumption means less private consumer choice. Secondly, there's the danger that governments misinterpret consumer needs or wants and produce the wrong things. And thirdly, if councils rather than consumers decide what should be produced, what's the yardstick for measuring whether they've made the right decisions? But of course, it's always open to voters to kick out governments that they think are spending their money wrongly, and the Sheffield emphasis on local provision of services at least means that people can see a clear link between what they're paying in taxes and what they're getting back in return.
It's a community that's using its resources and deciding itself, having some control itself over those resources. After all, it's the ordinary person who has created the wealth. It's the only person that's created the value in society of things. They should have a right to have a decision over what happens to those resources and how it affects their lives.
I think that the importance of the local initiative is that nobody really likes paying taxes. It's something that they don't really feel. It's something they want and something they had a say in identifying and encouraging.
We'll motivate people to start being active in the community, in the democratic process. We'll expect them to be active at work, in decision-making. We'll have a society that's dynamic, that will pick up the pieces, that will provide for its needs.
Misguided meddling, or economics as if people mattered?
Teachers may like to know that next Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, from 9:30 until 11 o'clock each day, there'll be previews of some of next term's school's programmes. Perhaps you might like to record these or try them with a class. There'll be mainly infant programmes on Monday, junior and middle school programmes on Tuesday, and middle and secondary programmes on Wednesday.
words for crooks, words of comfort, words of peace, words to make the fighting cease, words to tell you what to do.